The lecture hall of the Galactic Academy stretched like a great dome above the students. Hundreds of seats curved around a central platform where Professor Thane stood explaining survival techniques. The students came from across the known galaxy, each species bringing their own strengths and traditions. In the third row sat Ariel, a Vorthak princess whose purple skin gleamed like polished metal. Her people were warriors, bred for battle on high-gravity worlds. Her muscles rippled beneath her academy uniform as she took notes with precise military efficiency. Other Vorthak students sat near her, forming a cluster of intimidating strength. 2 rows behind her, Kale closed his eyes and let his mind wander across the thoughts of nearby students. The Eldari were natural telepaths, able to read minds and share thoughts without speaking. His pale blue skin seemed to glow softly as he practiced his abilities. Around him, other Eldari students communicated in perfect silence, their mental conversations flowing like music. Near the front of the hall, Nira absorbed the professor's words through the crystalline structures that made up her body. The Nexari were living gems, their silicon-based forms perfect for processing complex information. She could calculate survival odds and analyze environmental data faster than any computer. Her fellow Nexari students sparkled like a collection of precious stones as they shared data through light pulses. And in the very back row, almost hidden behind taller students, sat Hyunwoo. He was human, one of only 12 in the entire academy. While other species stood out with their unique features, Hyunwoo looked perfectly ordinary. He had black hair, brown eyes, and stood at average height. His skin was neither metallic like the Vorthak nor crystalline like the Nexari. He possessed no telepathic abilities like the Eldari, no natural armor, no enhanced processing power. Hyunwoo sat quietly with his notebook, writing down the professor's words in neat handwriting. He never asked questions during lectures. He never raised his hand to show off knowledge. He simply listened, wrote, and learned. The key to survival, Professor Thane was saying, is understanding your species' natural advantages. The old explorer had visited more worlds than anyone else in the academy. His weathered face showed the scars of 100 dangerous missions. Vorthak students, your strength and endurance are unmatched. Eldari, your mental abilities can detect danger before it appears. Nexari, your analytical powers can solve any puzzle. Hyunwoo continued writing. The professor rarely mentioned humans in these discussions. When he did, it was usually to point out what they lacked compared to other species. During the break, students gathered in their species groups. The Vorthak compared combat techniques, their voices booming across the hall. The Eldari sat in peaceful meditation, sharing thoughts and experiences. The Nexari formed complex geometric patterns as they exchanged information through light signals. Hyunwoo packed his notebook and quietly left the hall. He walked through corridors filled with alien students, none of whom paid him any attention. In the cafeteria, he selected simple foods and found an empty table in the corner. Other human students sat together at a nearby table, but Hyunwoo preferred to eat alone. "Look at the human," Ariel said to her Vorthak friends, pointing at Hyunwoo. "He sits by himself every day. My people would never allow such weakness in isolation. His mind is so simple," Kyle added, having accidentally brushed against Hyunwoo's thoughts while practicing. No complex telepathic structures, no advanced mental defenses, just basic thinking patterns. "I have analyzed his test scores," Nira announced to her crystalline companions. "Average in all subjects. His species shows no remarkable capabilities in any survival discipline." The other students nodded in agreement. Humans seemed to be the weakest species in the academy. They had no natural weapons, no enhanced senses, no special powers. Most alien students wondered why humans had been accepted into the survival program at all. After lunch, the class moved to the practical training center. Professor Thane set up scenarios designed to test different species' abilities. The Vorthak faced strength challenges, lifting massive weights and breaking through barriers. The Eldari worked on mental exercises, detecting hidden dangers through telepathic scanning. The Nexari solved complex puzzles that required advanced mathematics and logic. For the human students, the challenges seemed much simpler. Basic problem-solving, tasks, physical exercises that any species could complete, and memory tests that required no special abilities. Hyunwoo completed each task methodically, scoring adequate marks, but never excelling. Humans are interesting, Professor Thane told his assistant after class. They seem to have no particular strengths, yet they keep up with species that have obvious advantages. Perhaps they are simply persistent, the assistant replied. Not talented, but unwilling to give up. That evening, Hyunwoo returned to his small dormitory room. The walls were plain metal, decorated only with a single photograph of Earth. While other students filled their rooms with trophies and symbols of their homeworld's achievements, Hyunwoo kept his space simple and clean. He opened his notebook and reviewed the day's lessons. Professor Thane had discussed survival in extreme environments, focusing on how each species could use their natural gifts to overcome challenges. The Vorthak could survive in high gravity through strength. The Eldari could avoid dangers through mental detection. The Nexari could calculate optimal solutions to any problem. Hyunwoo wondered what humans could do that was special. His species seemed to have evolved without any particular advantages. They were not the strongest, fastest, smartest, or most resilient. Earth had produced a species that was average in every measurable way. As he prepared for sleep, Hyunwoo thought about the final exam that Professor Thane had mentioned, a practical survival test on a real world, where students would face genuine challenges instead of classroom simulations. The other students seemed excited by the prospect, confident that their species' gifts would ensure their success. Hyunwoo felt no such confidence. He had no special powers to rely on, no natural advantages to exploit. He would have to face whatever challenges came with nothing but basic human capabilities and whatever knowledge he could gather from his studies. The dormitory grew quiet as students across the galaxy species settled into sleep. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, new challenges, and eventually, the announcement of where their final test would take place. Hyunwoo closed his eyes and rested, preparing for whatever lay ahead with the same quiet determination he brought to everything else in his life. He had no way of knowing that soon everything would change. 3 weeks later, Professor Thane stood before his class with an expression that made even the bravest Vorthak students shift uncomfortably in their seats. Behind him, a massive holographic display showed swirling clouds and violent storms surrounding a dark planet. "Your final examination has been selected," Professor Thane announced. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too many dangerous worlds. "You will spend 72 hours surviving on Chorus Prime." The hologram rotated slowly, revealing a world that looked like it had been designed to kill everything that touched it. Red lightning cracked through black clouds. Acidic rain fell in sheets across barren landscapes. Mountains of volcanic glass jutted from the surface like broken teeth. Ariel leaned forward in her seat, her purple skin darkening with concern. She had trained on the harsh war worlds of her people, but this place looked far worse than anything the Vorthak had ever conquered. The planetary data, Professor Thane continued reading from his tablet. Gravity is 3.2 times galactic standard. Atmospheric pressure will crush most organic matter within minutes. Surface temperature ranges from -40 degrees to +60 degrees Celsius, often changing within hours. Kale closed his eyes and tried to reach out with his telepathic senses toward the image. All he felt was emptiness and pain. The planet seemed to absorb mental energy like a black hole, giving nothing back but suffering. The atmosphere contains sulfur compounds that will burn your respiratory systems, the professor went on. The water sources are contaminated with heavy metals and organic toxins. The local plant life is carnivorous and highly aggressive. Nira processed the data through her crystalline matrix, running thousands of calculations per second. Every scenario she computed ended in system failure. Her silicon-based structure would crack under the pressure changes. The acid rain would dissolve her crystal formations. The electromagnetic storms would disrupt her data processing completely. As for the animal life, Professor Thane said grimly, the planet has no herbivores. Everything that lives there kills to survive. The food chain consists entirely of predators eating other predators in an endless cycle of violence. A Vorthak student raised his hand, his voice shaking despite his warrior training. Professor, surely you cannot expect us to survive in such conditions. Even our strongest fighters would die within hours. The Eldari telepathic abilities would be useless there, Kyle added, his usual confidence completely gone. I can sense nothing from that world except death. My calculations show a 0% survival rate for any known species, Nira stated, her crystalline voice cracking with stress. This world violates every principle of habitable environment classification. Other students began voicing their fears and concerns. Some demanded to withdraw from the program immediately. Others questioned whether the academy had made an error in selecting such an impossible location. Through all the panic and protest, Hyunwoo sat quietly in his back row seat, studying the holographic display with calm interest. While his classmates saw only death and destruction, he was analyzing terrain features, weather patterns, and potential shelter locations. What classification does this world hold in the galactic database? Asked a nervous Zephyrian student. Professor Thane checked his records. Chorus Prime is classified as a Class X death world. According to galactic standards, such worlds are considered completely uninhabitable by all known forms of intelligent life. The announcement sent waves of terror through the classroom. Death worlds were legendary in their danger. Most species avoided them entirely. Even the bravest explorers only observed such planets from safe distances in heavily shielded ships. Professor, Ariel said, her warrior pride struggling against basic survival instinct. My people have conquered many worlds, but we have never attempted to land on a Class X planet. Our armor cannot protect us from such extreme conditions. The key mental barriers required to survive that level of psychic pressure would destroy an Eldari mind, Kyle admitted, his telepathic confidence completely shattered. The probability calculations are absolute, Nira confirmed. No known technology or biological adaptation can overcome all the hostile factors present on that world simultaneously. Professor Thane listened to their concerns with understanding, but remained firm in his decision. The final examination will proceed as planned. You will be equipped with basic survival gear only. No advanced technology, no species-specific equipment, no external support beyond emergency extraction if your life signs fail completely. What kind of survival gear? Asked a Trilaxian student, hoping for some advantage. Standard academy kit, the professor replied. Water purification tablets, basic medical supplies, emergency shelter material, simple tools, and 3 days of emergency rations. Nothing more. The student stared at him in disbelief. Basic human-level equipment against a world that could kill the galaxy's most dangerous predators. It seemed like academic suicide. The transport ships will scatter you across different regions of the planet, Professor Thane continued. You will be alone, facing conditions that have destroyed entire ecosystems. Your only communication will be an emergency beacon that will extract you if activated, resulting in immediate failure of the course. In the back row, Hyunwoo quietly raised his hand. The entire class turned to look at him, surprised that the silent human was finally speaking up. Yes, Hyunwoo? Professor Thane asked. When do we depart? Hyunwoo asked simply. The question stunned everyone. While his classmates were panicking about survival on an impossible world, the human was asking about scheduling details as if they were discussing a routine field trip. Tomorrow at dawn, Professor Thane replied, studying Hyunwoo with new interest. Are you not concerned about the planetary conditions? Hyunwoo considered the question seriously. It will be challenging, he admitted, but challenges can be overcome with proper preparation and adaptability. Ariel stared at him in amazement. Human, do you not understand? This world will kill you within hours. Your species has no natural defenses against such extreme conditions. Your physical capabilities are insufficient for the gravitational stress. Alone, Kyle added, genuinely concerned for the quiet student who had never bothered anyone. The mathematical certainty of failure approaches unity, Nira confirmed. Your survival probability rounds to 0%. Hyunwoo listened to their warnings with polite attention. I appreciate your concern, he said, but I believe we should attempt the examination as assigned. His calm acceptance of the impossible challenge left his classmates speechless. They saw only certain death ahead. Hyunwoo saw only another test to pass, another problem to solve through careful thought and persistent effort. As the class ended and students filed out in states of terror and despair, Hyunwoo packed his notebook and walked quietly toward the dormitory. Tomorrow would bring the greatest challenge of his academic career, possibly of his life. He spent the evening reviewing everything he knew about extreme environment survival, preparing for conditions that his alien classmates considered unsurvivable. While they prayed to their various gods and contacted their families with final messages, Hyunwoo simply prepared as best he could and went to sleep. The transport ships would launch at dawn, carrying them all toward a world that promised death to any who dared land upon its surface. The transport ship shook violently as it entered the atmosphere of Chorus Prime. Through the small windows, the students could see walls of acid rain and lightning storms that stretched across the horizon. The ship's hull groaned under the crushing atmospheric pressure, while emergency alarms blared throughout the passenger compartment. Ariel gripped her seat with hands that could crush steel, but even her Vorthak strength could not stop the fear that ran through her body. The acidic atmosphere was already eating away at the outer hull of the ship. She could hear the metal dissolving with soft hissing sounds that meant death was only millimeters away. My telepathic senses are completely blocked, Kyle whispered to himself, his usual mental clarity replaced by blind panic. The psychic dampening effects of the planet were like being suddenly struck deaf and blind. For an Eldari who had relied on mental abilities since birth, the experience was terrifying beyond words. Nira sat frozen in her seat, her crystalline body already showing hairline cracks from the pressure changes. Her computational abilities were failing as electromagnetic storms interfered with her silicon-based nervous system. For the first time in her existence, she could not calculate a solution to her problems. In the back of the transport, Hyunwoo checked his survival kit one more time. Water purification tablets, basic medical supplies, emergency shelter material, simple cutting tools, and 3 days of emergency rations. The same equipment that every student had received, designed for basic survival in normal environments. The ship's captain announced over the intercom that individual drop pods would scatter them across different regions of the planet. Each student would face their 72-hour survival test completely alone, with only an emergency beacon to call for extraction if they chose to fail the examination. First drop zone approaching, the captain called. Acidic marshlands, student. Designation Ariel. The Vorthak princess was loaded into her drop pod with hands shaking despite her warrior training. As her pod launched toward the surface, she could see through the small window that the ground below was covered in bubbling pools of acid that would dissolve her armor within minutes. Second drop zone, crystalline canyons, student designation, Kale. The Eldari student entered his pod in complete silence, his telepathic abilities useless in this psychically dead environment. Through his window, he saw jagged crystal formations that would block what little mental sensing he had left, while providing no shelter from the deadly storms. Third drop zone, volcanic region, student designation, Nira. The Nexari student's crystalline structure was already cracking from atmospheric pressure as her pod launched. Below her stretched an endless landscape of lava flows and toxic gas vents that would shatter her silicon-based body within hours. Other students followed in their individual pods, each facing terrain designed to exploit their species' particular weaknesses. The planet seemed to know exactly how to kill each type of alien life that dared to land on its surface. Final drop zone, forest region, student designation, Hyunwoo. The human student settled into his pod calmly, watching through the window as the surface approached. What looked like a peaceful forest from above revealed its true nature as he descended closer. The trees were moving, their branches reaching toward his falling pod with predatory intent. His pod crashed through the canopy and struck the ground with bone-jarring impact. Hyunwoo climbed out slowly, checking himself for injuries. The gravity was indeed 3 times normal, making every movement feel like he was carrying 2 other people on his back. The air burned his lungs with each breath, forcing him to take shallow, careful inhalations. Around him, the forest came alive with hostile intent. The trees were not plants at all, but massive carnivorous organisms that fed on anything foolish, enough to land in their territory. Their root systems formed underground networks that could detect the slightest vibration, while their branches moved like giant arms reaching for prey. Hyunwoo activated his communication device and checked the emergency beacon signals from his classmates. Ariel's beacon was already flashing distress codes as acid dissolved her equipment. Kale's signal showed erratic movement patterns that suggested complete disorientation. Nira's beacon indicated critical structural failure of her crystalline body. Most concerning was Boram's signal. The quiet Zephyrian girl had landed 12 kilometers away in what the scanner showed as extremely dangerous terrain. Her beacon was broadcasting a medical emergency code that meant immediate life-threatening conditions. A rational person would focus on their own survival first. The forest around Hyunwoo was filled with predators that could smell his alien biochemistry from kilometers away. The gravity made every step exhausting, while the toxic atmosphere slowly poisoned his respiratory system with each breath. Instead of finding shelter, Hyunwoo studied his scanner and began moving toward Boram's position. He picked his way carefully through the carnivorous forest, avoiding the obvious traps while noting which plants were truly dangerous and which were simply aggressive. His movements were economical and efficient, conserving energy for the long journey ahead. The trees attacked repeatedly, their branches whipping through the air fast enough to break bones. Hyunwoo dodged and weaved between them, using their own aggressive movements to navigate through the forest. When one massive tree creature blocked his path completely, he used his cutting tool to harvest sap from a smaller specimen and spread it on his clothing, masking his scent from the larger predator. Hours passed as he traveled across terrain that would kill most galactic species within minutes. He crossed rivers of contaminated water by constructing simple bridges from fallen branches. He climbed cliffs of volcanic glass by finding handholds that his alien classmates would never have noticed. He navigated through areas of toxic gas by covering his face with cloth soaked in filtered water. As night fell, the planet became even more dangerous. Nocturnal predators emerged from underground burrows, their hunting calls echoing across the deadly landscape. The temperature dropped 40 degrees in minutes, while acid rain began falling in heavy sheets that dissolved anything it touched. Hyunwoo constructed a temporary shelter using his emergency materials and local resources, creating protection against both the environmental hazards and the hunting creatures that surrounded him. Then he continued his journey through the darkness, following Boram's increasingly weak distress signal across 12 kilometers of the most hostile terrain in known space. Behind him, emergency beacons began activating across the planet as other students called for immediate extraction, choosing academic failure over certain death. Ahead of him, one classmate needed help that only a human could provide. Dawn came to Chorus Prime like a punch from an angry god. The temperature shot up 50 degrees in minutes while electromagnetic storms crackled across the sky. Hyunwoo had been traveling for 18 hours through terrain that should have killed him a dozen times over, yet he continued moving steadily toward Boram's distress signal. He found her trapped in a sinkhole that had opened during the night's seismic activity. The Zephyrian girl was barely conscious, her energy-based physiology disrupted by the planet's constant electromagnetic interference. Her normally glowing skin had faded to a dull gray, and sparks of unstable energy crackled weakly around her failing nervous system. "Help me," she whispered as Hyunwoo appeared at the edge of the pit. "I cannot control my energy matrix. The planet is draining everything from my body." Without hesitation, Hyunwoo began constructing a rope from vines and fiber strips torn from his emergency shelter. The sinkhole was 15 meters deep with walls of loose volcanic soil that collapsed at the slightest touch. Any wrong movement would bury them both under tons of poisonous earth. He rappelled down into the pit using techniques his grandfather had taught him during camping trips in Earth's mountains. The comparison seemed absurd now. What his family had called challenging outdoor recreation was apparently advanced survival training by galactic standards. Boram was trapped under a fallen boulder that would have been impossible for her energy-based physiology to move. For Hyunwoo, Working in 3 times normal gravity, it was simply a matter of finding the right leverage point and applying steady pressure until the rock shifted enough for her to crawl free. "How did you know to do that?" she asked weakly as he helped her stand. "My grandfather taught me," Hyunwoo replied, already examining her injuries. "He said rocks are like people. Apply pressure in the right place and they will move." Boram's energy matrix was dangerously unstable, her Zephyrian biology unable to cope with the planet's electromagnetic storms. Hyunwoo constructed a shelter, using local materials that somehow blocked the interference, allowing her energy patterns to stabilize. "This should not work," Boram said in amazement as her natural glow returned. "How did you know which materials would provide electromagnetic shielding?" "Trial and error," Hyunwoo admitted. "Also, my grandmother was an electrician. She taught me about interference patterns." As Boram recovered, word spread through the emergency communication network. The quiet human was moving across the death world, reaching stranded students and, somehow, keeping them alive. Other students began reporting his appearances at their locations. Ariel had been dying slowly as acid dissolved her armor and poisoned her respiratory system. She was discovered by Hyunwoo constructing an alkaline mud bath using limestone deposits and filtered water, neutralizing the acid damage to her body. "How did you know the chemical composition needed for neutralization?" Ariel asked as her purple skin began healing. "High school chemistry," Hyunwoo replied, gathering more limestone. "Also, my mother worked in a factory that processed metals." She explained acid and base reactions. Kyle had been wandering in circles through the crystal canyons, his telepathic blindness leaving him completely helpless. Hyunwoo found him and began creating acoustic signals that the Eldari could follow, a primitive navigation system that worked without mental abilities. "Your species developed this technique?" Kyle asked gratefully as the sound patterns guided him to safety. "My father was a forest ranger," Hyunwoo explained. "He taught me how to signal across long distances when radios fail." Nira was discovered with her crystalline structure cracking from pressure and temperature stress. Hyunwoo had somehow created a support framework using local materials that maintained her structural integrity while allowing her to move safely. The engineering principles behind this construction should require advanced computational analysis, Nira said in wonder as her crystal matrix stabilized. "My uncle was a construction worker," Hyunwoo replied simply. "He showed me how to build things that do not fall down." Each rescue revealed another layer of human capability that seemed impossible to other species. Hyunwoo did not possess supernatural strength like the Vorthak, telepathic abilities like the Eldari, or computational power like the Nexari. Instead, he had something far more valuable, a lifetime of accumulated knowledge from a species that had learned to survive everything. His family had not been soldiers or scientists or explorers. They had been ordinary people living ordinary lives on a world that casually presented challenges that would destroy entire alien civilizations. A grandfather who enjoyed mountain climbing, a grandmother who understood electrical systems, a mother who worked with dangerous chemicals, a father who navigated through wilderness areas, an uncle who built structures that could withstand natural disasters. On Earth, this was called having a normal family with regular jobs. In the galaxy, it was apparently the most comprehensive survival education possible. Professor Thane monitored the situation from orbit, watching in amazement as Hyunwoo's beacon moved steadily across the planet's most dangerous regions. Instead of barely surviving in isolation, the human was creating safe zones where multiple species could shelter together. "How is this possible?" Commander Vex asked, reviewing the orbital data. The ancient Nexari had overseen survival training for thousands of students across hundreds of worlds. She had never seen anything like this. "Look at their homeworld data again," Professor Thane said quietly, pulling up Earth's environmental files. The data revealed the truth that had been hidden in plain sight. Earth's normal conditions included ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, massive storms, seismic activity, predator species, resource scarcity, environmental toxins, and constant climate changes. The planet's history was an endless catalog of extinction events and environmental disasters. Their entire evolution took place on a death world, Commander Vex realized. What they consider normal living conditions would be classified as hostile emergency scenarios by our safety standards. Every human is a death world survivor by birth, Professor Thane confirmed. They do not think of it as special because, to them, it is simply Tuesday. On the surface of Chorus Prime, Hyun-woo had established a base camp where 8 students from different species worked together under his guidance. They were not just surviving. They were adapting to the environment and learning to thrive in conditions that should have killed them all. The quiet human who kept to himself had revealed something that would change everything the galaxy thought. It knew about survival, adaptation, and the incredible resilience that emerges from worlds that refuse to let anything live easily. And this was only the beginning. By the second day on Chorus Prime, Hyun-woo had accomplished something that violated every principle of death world survival. Instead of hiding in a shelter and counting the hours until extraction, he had created a thriving settlement where 8 alien students lived and worked together. The base camp showed signs of not just survival, but active improvement of the environment. Hyun-woo had constructed water purification systems using volcanic sand and charcoal filters. He had identified local plants that were edible when properly prepared, creating a sustainable food source that supplemented their emergency rations. Most impressively, he had organized defensive systems that kept the planet's aggressive predators at bay without killing them unnecessarily. "This is not possible," Ariel said as she helped maintain the perimeter barriers. Her Vorthak warrior training had never included working with the environment instead of conquering it. "My people would level this entire forest and build fortified positions. You have made the forest work for us instead." "It seemed more efficient," Hyun-woo replied, checking the water filtration system he had built from salvaged materials and local resources. Destroying the ecosystem would create more problems than it solved. Kyle sat near the central fire, his telepathic abilities slowly returning as he learned to function without them. "On my world, we would use mental powers to control the local wildlife. You have achieved the same result using behavioral understanding and environmental modification. Animals are predictable if you understand what they need," Hyun-woo explained, stirring a pot of soup made from processed local vegetation. "Most aggression comes from fear or hunger. Address those needs, and the aggression usually stops." Nira was fascinated by the construction techniques Hyun-woo used, which seemed to violate several principles of engineering, yet worked perfectly in practice. "Your structural calculations should be impossible without advanced computational assistance. How do you determine load-bearing capacity and stress distribution?" "My uncle taught me to listen to the materials," Hyun-woo said, adjusting a support beam that had been giving warning creaks. "Wood and stone and metal all make sounds when they are happy or unhappy. You learn to hear the difference." From orbit, Professor Thane and Commander Vex watched the impossible spectacle unfold. The human settlement had grown from a basic shelter into something resembling a small town. Students who should have been dead were not only surviving but actively improving their situation. The temperature regulation systems alone should require advanced technology, Commander Vex observed, studying the orbital thermal readings. He has created climate control using nothing but local materials and basic physics principles. "Look at the resource management," Professor Thane added, pointing to the supply distribution patterns. "He has established sustainable food production, water recycling, waste processing, and even primitive manufacturing capabilities, all constructed from planetary resources in less than 48 hours. The most disturbing discovery was not what Hyun-woo had built, but how easily he had built it. The construction showed no signs of complex planning or difficult problem solving. He had simply looked at the available materials and environmental challenges, then created solutions using techniques that seemed completely natural to him. "Run a comparison analysis," Commander Vex ordered. "How do Earth's environmental conditions compare to Chorus Prime?" The computer processed the data and displayed results that made both experienced educators stare in silence. Earth's normal weather patterns included temperature variations that exceeded most planets' extreme emergency conditions. Its atmospheric composition contained oxygen levels that would be toxic to many species. Its gravitational field was in the high range of what most aliens could tolerate for short periods. Their homeworld is already a Class B hazardous environment, Professor Thane said quietly. And according to their own records, they consider it a pleasant garden world suitable for family recreation. What do they classify as dangerous? Commander, Vex asked. The computer displayed Earth's historical records of natural disasters, volcanic eruptions that blocked sunlight for years, ice ages that covered continents in kilometers of frozen water, asteroid impacts that caused mass extinctions, earthquakes that split the ground and swallowed entire cities. They survived all of this, Professor Thane realized. Not as individuals, but as a species. Every human carries genetic memories of environments that would destroy our most advanced colonies. On the planet's surface, other students were beginning to understand what made humans different. It was not superior strength or intelligence or technology. It was something far more fundamental. The ability to adapt to any environment by understanding it instead of fighting it. Watch how he moves, Boram said to the others as Hyunwoo checked the defensive barriers. He does not waste energy fighting the gravity or the atmosphere. He has adjusted his body to work with the conditions instead of against them. His mind processes environmental data differently than ours, Kyle added, his telepathic senses finally detecting the human's thought patterns. We see dangers to avoid. He sees resources to utilize. The same poisonous plant that would kill us becomes a tool for water purification in his hands. He has created 17 different solutions for problems we did not know existed. Nira calculated, her analytical abilities working properly for the first time since landing. Climate control, food processing, defensive systems, tool manufacturing, medical treatment, communication networks, waste disposal, and others. Each solution uses only materials available on the planet itself. The alien students were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that did not just survive in hostile environments, but transformed them into livable spaces. Humans did not conquer death worlds. They converted them into garden worlds through patient understanding and careful adaptation. As the third day began, emergency beacons across the planet had gone silent. Not because students were dead, but because they no longer needed emergency extraction. Under human guidance, they had learned to live in conditions that their species had considered impossible to survive. How long could we stay here? Ariel asked, genuinely curious. As long as necessary, Hyunwoo replied, tending the cooking fire that had become the center of their small community. The systems are sustainable and can be expanded as needed. With proper development, this could support a much larger population. The Vorthak warrior stared at him in amazement. You speak of colonizing a death world as if it were a normal construction project. Every world is livable if you understand what it needs, Hyunwoo said simply. This one just needs more work than most. Above them, Professor Thane was reaching the same conclusion that would reshape galactic civilization's understanding of environmental adaptation. Humans were not just survivors. They were the ultimate terraforming species capable of making any world habitable through patient effort and careful understanding. The quiet student who had kept to himself was revealing the most valuable capability in the known galaxy, the ability to turn any environment into a home. The extraction ships arrived at Chorus Prime expecting to find survivors clinging to life in emergency shelters, desperate for rescue from the hostile death world. Instead, they discovered a small settlement that looked like it had been established for months rather than days. Hyunwoo had expanded the base camp into a functioning community. Students from 8 different species worked together in organized teams, managing food production, water distribution, construction projects, and defensive systems. The death world that should have killed them all had become, under human guidance, a place where they could live indefinitely. This is impossible, the extraction team leader reported to Professor Thane. The settlement shows signs of permanent habitation. They have established agriculture, manufacturing, and infrastructure development. Some students are requesting to remain on the planet for extended research. Professor Thane reviewed the orbital scans one final time. The thermal signatures showed a thriving community with regulated temperatures, efficient resource usage, and expanding construction projects. The biological readings indicated healthy, well-fed inhabitants who showed no signs of survival stress. "Bring them all back," he ordered. "We need to understand what happened here." The return to the Galactic Academy was unlike any previous survival examination. Instead of exhausted, traumatized students grateful to escape a hostile environment, the returnees seemed almost reluctant to leave their temporary home on Chorus Prime. "We were just getting started," Ariel complained as she packed her equipment. Her Vorthak warrior pride had been replaced by genuine enthusiasm for the construction projects they had been working on. "Another week, and we could have built proper manufacturing facilities." The ecosystem was beginning to respond to our management techniques, Kale added, his telepathic abilities now enhanced by learning to function without them. "I was developing new methods of communication with the local wildlife. Our resource extraction and processing systems were approaching optimal efficiency," Nira calculated with satisfaction. "The mathematical principles involved in sustainable development are far more complex and interesting than simple survival calculations." Back in the academy classroom, everything had indeed changed. Hyunwoo was no longer the quiet student who sat in the back row. Every species in the class wanted him as a teammate for survival exercises. His human classmates, previously overlooked and underestimated, were suddenly recognized as the most valuable partners for any dangerous environment mission. Professor Thane restructured the entire curriculum around what he now called human adaptive methodologies. The techniques that Hyunwoo had used instinctively became core subjects that students from all species needed to master. Environmental integration instead of environmental conquest. Resource utilization instead of resource consumption. Cooperative development instead of competitive survival. The old methods focused on using species-specific advantages to overcome hostile conditions, Professor Thane explained to his updated classes. Human methods focus on understanding the environment well enough to work with it instead of against it. The changes went far beyond academic programs. News of the Chorus Prime survival test spread throughout the galactic community, transforming how every species viewed environmental challenges. Worlds that had been written off as uninhabitable were suddenly being reconsidered for colonization, projects using human consulting expertise. "We always assumed that hostile environments required superior technology to overcome," Commander Vex admitted during a faculty meeting. "Humans have demonstrated that understanding and patience are more effective than force and equipment." The human students found themselves in unprecedented demand. Planetary development corporations offered massive contracts for environmental consulting services. Military organizations wanted to learn human survival techniques for extreme condition operations. Scientific institutions requested human participation in exploration missions to previously impossible destinations. Through all the attention and opportunity, Hyunwoo remained characteristically modest about his accomplishments. When Professor Thane offered him advanced placement and honors recognition, he politely declined, preferring to continue at his own pace while helping classmates who struggled with survival concepts. "Why do you not take credit for revolutionizing galactic survival science?" Ariel asked him after a particularly successful training exercise where her team had learned to establish sustainable shelter systems. Hyunwoo considered the question with his usual thoughtfulness. "I did not revolutionize anything. I just used techniques my family taught me." "But those techniques have changed how the entire galaxy approaches environmental challenges," Kale pointed out, his telepathic senses now detecting the quiet confidence that had always been present in the human's mind. "My grandmother always said that the best solutions are the ones that seem obvious after someone explains them," Hyunwoo replied. "If our methods help other species survive in difficult places, that seems like a good thing." Nira processed the implications through her crystalline matrix. "You are saying that human survival capabilities are not considered exceptional by your own species." "Everyone on Earth knows how to do these things," Hyunwoo confirmed. "We learn them as children because our planet requires it. What you call advanced survival techniques, we call basic life skills." The alien student stared at him in amazement as the full truth became clear. Earth was not just a death world that had produced capable survivors. Earth was a death world that had produced an entire species of environmental adaptation experts who considered their abilities completely normal. "What other capabilities do humans possess that you consider unremarkable?" Commander Vex asked during a private interview with Hyunwoo. I would not know what to tell you, Hyunwoo replied honestly. We do not think of our abilities as special because they are simply what is required to live on our planet. Perhaps if you told me what specific challenges you face, I could explain how we address similar problems at home. Commander Vex showed him classified reports of failed colonization attempts on hostile worlds throughout the galaxy, mining operations shut down by extreme conditions, research stations abandoned due to environmental hazards, exploration missions canceled because of atmospheric toxicity. Hyunwoo reviewed the reports with genuine interest. These all look like problems with engineering approaches, he concluded. You are trying to impose your familiar environment on unfamiliar worlds. It would be more efficient to adapt your operations to match the local conditions. How would you approach the colonization of a methane world with crushing atmospheric pressure and corrosive precipitation? Commander Vex asked, testing the limits of human adaptability. I would need to study the specific conditions, Hyunwoo replied thoughtfully. But generally, you would want to work with the methane cycle instead of against it, use the atmospheric pressure for power generation, and find ways to neutralize or utilize the corrosive elements. My cousin works in chemical processing and might have useful suggestions for handling the precipitation issues. Commander Vex realized that she was talking to a representative of a species that casually treated impossible environmental challenges as routine engineering problems. Every human carried knowledge that could unlock worlds throughout the galaxy. As word spread through galactic civilization, the implications became clear. Humans were not just another member species of the galactic community. They were the key to expanding that community into environments that had previously been considered permanently uninhabitable. The quiet student who had kept to himself in class had revealed a truth that would reshape the galaxy. Earth had not produced a species of survivors, but a species of world builders who could make any planet into a home. And somewhere in the depths of space, countless hostile worlds waited for human ingenuity to transform them from barriers into opportunities, from death worlds into garden, worlds where all species could thrive together. Everything had changed, starting with one human who simply did what his species had always done: adapt, survive, and help others do the same.